Good morning and welcome to 2021 Spring Economic Forecast. I'm honored to welcome all of our current students, alumni, philanthropic donors, and our community members who are joining us today. Thank you. As most of you know, our College of Business and Economics is the second largest accredited business school in the country. And with that comes immense responsibility of educating our business leaders. Our alumni have shaped business across Southern California and beyond in all industries. They are an integral part of our regional, national, and international companies, nonprofit organization, new business, and government agencies. We are extraordinarily proud of our graduates. You may also know that I will leave my post as Dean of College of Business Economics and turn back to the classroom full-time. Teaching is my first passion, and I can tell you that this college has undeniably transformed my life. If there is anything that I have learned is that transformation does not just happen to you. You have to actively participate in that transformation. In the same way that I engage in opportunities with the college, our students engage with the curriculum to learn about and build upon their skills. They engage with our faculty, they challenge the status quo, and prepare themselves to lead. They also engage and depend on members of community like you to serve as a role model and mentor. All of you here today have played a significant role in the success of our College of Business and Economics, and in some way, directly and indirectly, you have contributed to the accomplishment of our students who have come through our doors. For that, I sincerely thank you. Please continue to connect with us and share your expertise. Your involvement helps us to create a real-world, hands-on education that we prize so highly. Of course, one of our dedicated partners in this endeavor is Ash Patel and Commercial Bank of California. I thank Ash and the bank for being our presenting sponsor today. Thank you, Ash. Our university president, Fran Vergi, also reflects our mission as well, and his guidance and ambitious vision have been valuable to me and to the College of Business. It is my distinct honor and pleasure to introduce California State Fullerton President and my good friend, the Honorable Fran Vergi.
Well, hello, everyone. On behalf of all of us at Cal State Fullerton, home to the largest business school in the state and the second largest business school in the nation, I am proud to welcome you to our spring economic forecast, Pandemic Blues and Economic Clues. I'm honored to thank you for being here. Sure, you're picking up some invaluable economic forecasting from our outstanding faculty and panelists, but you are also supporting our business honors program and its amazing students. So thank you for that. I know you don't always get to see the transformative effect that you have on our students while they are in school, but you do get to see your investment returned when our graduates join your companies and lead our communities. We are so grateful that mutually beneficial partnership exists, and we recognize that all of you are a big reason why we have become not just one of the largest business schools in the nation, but one of the most lauded as well. I look forward to hearing the economic forecast, especially this year. But before we get to it, I have a bit of a Cal State Fullerton forecast for you. One that I have to tell you I've been longing for since we transitioned to virtual more than a year ago. And that forecast is this: we are coming back to campus for fall 2021. Already our transition back to campus has begun, slowly, steadily, and responsibly, and always putting health and safety of our Titans and their families and communities first. And while our hope and expectation is to be primarily in person in the fall, we remain ready to pivot at any time, depending on the guidelines from our local, state, and national health agencies. It's also important to note that we are repopulating the campus, and as we do so, we will not discard the technology we have used to innovate over the past year. Instead, we'll continue to use it. We'll increase equity, we'll increase access and student success, and it'll also help us emerge better equipped to serve the new generation of Titans. All of you are integral to that transition, and so I look forward to seeing you again in person soon. Until then, know that we miss you and we remain grateful for all that you do for our students, our graduates, and our community. And finally, I want to thank all of our speakers and presenters, especially the person I have the honor of introducing now, Ash Patel. He's the president and CEO of Commercial Bank of California. Commercial Bank of California is our presenting sponsor, and Ash is a tremendous partner to our College of Business and our entire university. And while none of his many impressive degrees in finance and banking came from Cal State Fullerton, make no mistake, he's a Titan, and I'm proud to introduce him now. Titan family, I am proud to introduce President and CEO of Commercial Bank of California, Ash Patel.
Good morning, everybody. My name is Ash Patel. I'm the President and CEO of Commercial Bank of California. How am I involved with Cal State Fullerton? For the past 5 years, I've been on the Dean's Advisory Board, and we have supported Cal State Fullerton financially from time to time. We also recruit from Cal State Fullerton to provide mentorship and guidance for the graduating students that come out of Cal State Fullerton. What is CBC and how does it help the local community? Well, CBC is a small business bank with $1.6 million in assets, locally owned, locally managed. We have 6 locations, 3 in Los Angeles County and 3 in Orange County. How has CBC helped local community? Well, during PPP, CBC originated close to $350 million in loans, helping local businesses, creating jobs or saving jobs for local employers in the county. CBC has grown 7x in 7 years, up to $1.6 billion from $200 million in 2013. Now, it is my honor to introduce Cal State Fullerton's presenting team of the economic forecast today, led by Dr. Anil Puri and Dr. Meera Farkas. Dr. Anil Puri currently serves as a director of Wood Center for Economic Analysis and Forecasting at Cal State Fullerton. The center produces economic reports and forecasts that are widely used by businesses and public leaders. Dr. Puri has previously served as a provost and vice president for academic awards, the dean of college and economic analysis, and the chair of economic department of Cal State Fullerton. Dr. Puri has published extensively in journals and undertaken grant research as a director of Wood Center, produced and delivered economic forecasts for over 2 decades. He is a frequent speaker and has served on several corporate boards and nonprofit boards. It is also my pleasure to introduce Meera Farkas, PhD, an associate in professor of economics and co-director for Wood Center for Economic Analysis and Forecasting at Cal State Fullerton. She has also published leading academic journals in the fields of monetary policy and financial economics, and is nationally recognized as an economics in business and economic forecasting. Dr. Farkas is a recipient of multiple awards for her academic research, teaching, and accuracy for forecast. Dr. Farkas holds a BA in economics from Cal State University, Fresno, and an MA and a PhD in economics from Columbia University. Now welcome you and turn it over to Dr. Puri.
Ash, thank you for introducing Meera and me so graciously. We appreciate you and Commercial Bank support of the Wood Center, and of course Cal State Fullerton, and other sponsors as well, Infinity Bank, the Philanthropic Foundation, and other sponsors. Without your help, we won't be able to do this work. Let me be honest about that. Even when we're not serving you lunch or inviting you for networking, you're sticking with us. That's great. I can make one prediction today, right now, that we will have a face-to-face event next year, and hopefully with lunch. So thank you for sticking with us. I also want to thank our President, President Pram Verji, and our Dean, Dr. Murtaza Rahmatian, for supporting us. Without their encouragement, we wouldn't be able to do this. Well, today is a day of a celebration, let me be honest with you, and we are very optimistic. In fact, it's a day for a party. And party, when I say party, is the vaccine reveal party. We have medicines all available, Moderna and Pfizer and J&J. J&J is coming back, I understand. And that's a great news because they are so effective that it's turning the corner around. You know, it wasn't very long ago, just in December, January, when things looked just terrible. Infection rates from 30,000 in March or April last year have gone up to 250,000 per day. Hospitalizations and deaths are also skyrocketed in the 2 months. And ICU were filled with people, 24,000 instead of 15,000 just a few months ago. So vaccines, and of course, all the things that you're doing, masking, staying away from people 6 feet apart, all these things are making a difference. It was like, you know, winter is coming like from Game of Thrones, and it really was. January, especially December and January months were terrible. The good news, however, is that we are past that. Vaccinations, because of a very organized nationwide effort, the number of vaccinations is up 3 million per day. In fact, it may be more than 3 million per day as we move forward. You know, there are about 332 million people in the United States, and 267 million are adults eligible for vaccinations. Of those, 130 million, almost 130 million or more, have gotten one vaccine, which is about 38%, and 80 million people have gotten 2 doses. They're fully vaccinated. So it's a great improvement, and it's only going to get better. If you look at states which have done better, California is among those states which has vaccinated more than 37% of its people, along with others that you see here. We also have states in the Midwest and West Coast, Washington and Oregon, rates are somewhere between 32 to 37%. And then we have states in the South where the rate of vaccination is still low, but not bad, 32%. When it comes to the impact of this COVID on the economy, there are so many different ways to look at it. If you look at the GDP fell by 10%, over 10% in May, June period. And then it has gone back up. As of end of last year, GDP is only below 2.4%, below the pre-pandemic level. And if you use the Atlanta Fed's number for the first quarter of this year coming up, we would be at the end of this, end of March, that is, only about 1.2% below our pre-pandemic level. Employment, however, situation is a lot worse. After dropping by 12%, payroll employment has gone up, but we are still about 6.9% below the level before the pandemic. And the reason for that is that leisure and hospitality and other contact services, which are a big part of GDP, relative to the big part of employment rather, 15%, is only half as much of GDP. So as a result, because leisure and hospitality were adversely affected, GDP has come back up, but employment still has some ways to go. This recovery has been lopsided or bifurcated in a number of different ways. If you look at the difference between goods sector and the services sector, goods sector went down but came back up in a much better way than the employment and services sector, where it is still about 5.6% below the pre-pandemic level compared to goods sector. Another way where this has been a really sort of divided recovery, look at the employment of high earners. After dropping a little bit soon after the pandemic, it has gone back up. In fact, employment in high earners, for high earners is 1% above the pre-pandemic level. Not so for income with lower income categories. Employment there improved, but fell back again in November, December period, and is still about 30% below the pre-pandemic level. So this has been a recovery with very different impacts. Another example here. Look at the real estate market, commercial versus household. Home prices are up 16% compared to 2019, but not so with commercial real estate prices, which are still down about 4.5%. Now, if you look at within the categories in the commercial sector, industrial and apartment buildings are still doing okay. Now, we're looking at commercial mortgage-backed securities, where they're still issuing those in these two areas, but not so in office, retail, and hotels. as you probably know. Hotels are expected to come back soon as the economy opens up. Retail, no, we are already with oversupply in retail industry. So that will take some time. And office will depend on how industries restructure, how many of their people they bring back to work, and how many can continue to work from home. Another different way to look at the diversity of the impact of the pandemic is look across the country and at different states. If you look at states that have suffered the most, here in red, California is one of those, where states have lost more than 7% of their pre-pandemic jobs. Hawaii and Nevada are there because of their tourism businesses, but there are other states in the Northeast as well. States in the mid-range from 5 to 7% losses are most of them in the Midwest or South, and then we have states that have done much better in terms of losses are mostly in the South, and states that did not have very strong lockdown and shutdown of their businesses. But the good side is that we're on the better side of the curve. Vaccinations have helped, and we are looking at the brighter side of the economy in the picture. And the reason for that is the cases are down, and deaths are down because of control of the virus, not only because of vaccinations, because all of you are taking better precautionary measures, masking, keeping the distance, and doing other things. We will continue to see this improvement as we see in hospitalization, ICU wards, and if this trend continues, we expect that we will get to immunity sometime in early June to mid-June nationally, and earlier in some other parts of that. Spring seems to be around as far as economic activity is concerned. If you look at the world production, it's up 8.2%, a remarkable multi-year high. World trade is also up. I know Europe and other places are still having some problems, but overall the world economy is looking much better today than it did just a few months ago. Labor market again has picked up after recovery. Soon after the May-June decline, we were generating over 2 million jobs per month, but then the rate slowed down, and December and January it was very low. In fact, we lost jobs in December, 310,000. But the latest number for March is remarkable, 910,000 increase, and we expect that this will continue. We'll talk about that in just a little while. Some of the sectors actually have done much better after a very steep drop in the stock market, 35% between February and March. The stock market took off after the CARES Act was passed in mid-March. If you compare that low level to today, stock market is up 84.5%, S&P index. And compared to before pandemic, it's about 22% higher, a remarkable recovery in the stock market. Retail sales again have shot up after a very deep drop. In fact, the March numbers close to 9% was one of the highest. And sales are up 20% compared to pre-pandemic levels. Housing, another sector that has done just great in recovering. Builders' confidence index is up. Housing permits are up 1.9 million housing per year. And that's a great improvement from about 600,000 soon after the pandemic started. Existing home sales are skyrocketing at a rate of 6 to 7 million per sales. And other sectors like manufacturing, after declining by 9%, it is up by 9% now, way above the pre-pandemic level. As we mentioned earlier, manufacturing has done very well anyway compared to services sector. Manufacturing shipments, after dropping 20% after the pandemic, are up 2.5%, 2.8% since then. Vehicle sales, car sales, a remarkable recovery after a drop to about 8.7 million annualized average in April, is more than doubled now. In March number, 17.7 million annualized rate is one of the highest that we have seen. Corporate profits, again, are very robust now in the last two quarters, third and fourth quarter, after dropping in the first and second quarter of last year. And this quarter, reports are coming out just now, and hopefully it'll be as good as the previous quarter is. So there are a number of sectors that have done really well. What has kept the economy going now, what has brought the economy forward, in addition to COVID control through vaccinations and preventive measures, is what the government has done and the Fed has done. This is the sort of gift that keep on giving. 6 different stimulus packages have been passed during this past year and this year to fight the downturn from COVID. The latest one is American Rescue Plan that was passed just in March, $1.3 trillion worth. It includes stimulus checks of about $4 billion. And let me mention that without the ARP, it was estimated that GDP will be still about 1.3% compared to the pre-pandemic level by the end of 2021. But because of ARP, now GDP is expected to reach its pre-pandemic level by the third quarter of this year. Now, the cost of doing that is very high, $1.9 trillion. But at the same time, the jobs saved and the output produced will make up for part of that. So about the $400 billion of the $1.9 trillion package is going in direct stimulus. States are getting about $362 billion rather, and unemployment benefits worth about $200 billion. And then tax incentives, healthcare, education, and others, they are getting a substantial chunk of this money. This is a plan maybe a bit too large. Some of the provisions of the plan are going to expire in the next few months. PPP is going to end in May. Moratorium evictions rather, and mortgage forbearance is going to end on June 30th. Unemployment benefits and extended unemployment benefits, they're all going to end on September 6th. And student loan forbearance will also end on September 30th. So it's good that some of these measures that were passed to help people as the economy is recovering, we don't need them anymore. But we have a new president and a new party. Elections have consequences, and we are seeing that. President Biden has proposed an infrastructure bill, American Jobs Act, $2.25 trillion, $2.25 trillion. A lot of it is going to be spent on transportation infrastructure and what is typically regarded as infrastructure. But he also has $400 billion for elderly care, for at home and community-based centers care of the elderly. Another $300 billion for manufacturing, for R&D, and for creating an inventory, a storehouse for medical equipment. Green energy, R&D, $213 billion, education, $137 billion, and water sanitation measures, $111 billion. And then you have money for weatherization, power grids, broadband, and workforce. So one of the largest, the largest expansion of the government and the largest package ever proposed for infrastructure. How are we going to pay for that? Now, President Biden's idea is to hike taxes on businesses. He proposes raising corporate tax rate from 21 to 28%, a 15% tax, a new tax on book income, and he also proposing raising global tax, income tax on corporations from 10.5 to 21%. Now, is that enough? Will it add up to $2.25 trillion? We believe that it adds up to only about $1.4 trillion, leaving a gap of about $850 billion to be filled. In fact, I hear that the tax hike may not go up to 28, it may be only 25%, which will enlarge this gap. So how is that gap going to be filled? We don't know at this point. There will be discussions over the next few months, and we'll find out more about it. But taxes are taxes. They have a bite. And they are going to affect the economy and businesses. It reminds me of the story about President Biden's dog, Major. You probably heard that, the German Shepherd. He bit somebody and he was sent home to Delaware. Now, taxes are like dog bites. They're going to hurt. No matter how good President may feel about his dog, and it's a good dog, doesn't bite, but they do have an impact. And we don't know exactly how much the tax will bite, but there's no question that they will have some negative consequences to be analyzed later. So where are we now? Where have we been and how we are going to move forward? To look at that question, we look at this index that Moody has created. It's a back to normal index. Tells us when we will get back to normal. It's about 37 variables that are included in this index. Now, we started out with a great fall in February through April, May period. And then there was a sharp recovery for a very short period of time, couple of months. And since then, we have been sort of steadily moving along up and down until the conditions got worse in December and January. And now the question is, we're getting better. It's getting warmer. The economy is getting better. The question is, what is up next? What is the next act? We're going to provide answers for that. But before we do that, let me just make a request that please post your questions as we go through the presentation using the Q&A button on your screen. We'll answer these questions after the real estate panel. Well, as for the next act for this forecast is Mira Farka. So I'm going to ask Mira to come on and take the story from here. Mira?
Thank you, Anil, and good morning, everyone. Well, as I was thinking today about what our outlook is, right? What is our second act? Where are we headed? I was reminded of an exchange between Churchill and the great playwright George Bernard Shaw. And it goes something along the lines of, Shaw writes to Churchill, well, here are 2 tickets for the first night of the new play, bring a friend if you have one, to which Churchill responds, cannot attend first night, will attend the first one if there is one. Now, I'm here to tell you that we will have a second night. We will have a second act, and it will be splendid. Just look at the difference a year makes. Last year, the quarantine world was transfixed by Tiger King and its bizarre, sort of weird, eccentric cast of characters. And we're all wondering whether the animals are happy, right? Well, a year later, Tiger King has been dethroned to be replaced by Bridgerton. Yes, a very silly, but also lighthearted, sort of vibrant, kind of feel-good sort of show. So that itself actually makes progress, kind of constitute progress. In the words of Bridgerton, the social season is upon us. And indeed, the social season is upon us. What's our outlook? Well, the boom is upon us. Look, in my entire life, and I've been doing this for quite a while, this is the most optimistic forecast I've ever given, ever. We are forecasting growth rate of 6.8% this year. You'll have to go back. I mean, this number will actually make us blush in normal times, given how unrealistic it appears, right? But we can even be a bit on the downside, I think. Things may even end up being better than what we're forecasting. You'll have to go all the way back to 1984 to see number this big. 1984, the year, not the Orwellian dystopia. And just for comparison, just to give you a sense of how long ago that was, it was a lifetime ago, right? It was a generation ago. But 1984 was the year when Prince was rocking to Purple Rain, when Apple introduced Mac, when Madonna was still a virgin, well, at least singing like a virgin, and when yours truly, there we go, was sporting a real goofy, kind of horrible haircut from behind the Iron Curtain, I must add. So with that, I welcome you to the new Roaring 20s with a twist of the 80s. Now, there are 4 main reasons why we're optimistic about the forecast. And the first one is for sure that this recession was the shortest in history. It lasted all but 6 weeks. Recovery began in May, June, and has continued ever since. If you look, for example, at real GDP numbers, GDP fell last April as the world shut down, but right now, and actually this is the latest number as of December of last year, we're 2.4% below trend. In fact, if you add the first quarter, we're probably going to be about 1.3% below where we were prior to the recession. If you look at labor markets, right? Labor markets are actually, this is payroll employment. We lost a total of 22.3 million jobs when this recovered during the shutdown, but we've recovered continuously since then. We've added about 14 million jobs since then. We're still now about 8.4 million jobs below pre-recession levels. And of course, just for comparison, back during the Great Recession, we lost about 8.6 million jobs. Now, speaking of Great Recession, and this is the second reason for optimism, This is not the Great Recession. This is a global natural disaster, right? Which differs actually from all other recessions we've ever seen. Going to the COVID recession, the economy was pretty strong. The fundamentals was pretty strong. If you think about Great Recession, the economy was actually kind of overextended, so overheated because of subprime lending. Before COVID recession, the economy was growing, but it wasn't overheated. If you look at debt, if you look at household debt, banking debt, record high levels during the Great Recession, 100% of GDP, 125% of GDP. Now, before COVID recession hit, record low levels, 30-year low levels for household debt as well as for banking sector. If you want to think about government stimulus, right? Too little back then. We can argue it's probably too much right now, and that's what I'm going to come back to when I discuss risks in a little bit. But if you want a real proof as to how this time around is much different than during the Great Recession, I give you Tom Brady. Last time, during the height of the Great Recession, he lost the Super Bowl. This time, he actually won it. He was hated outside Boston back then. He was hated outside Tampa now. But things cannot be any more different. So this is great, great news. This is not the Great Recession. The third big reason for optimism, for sort of this juiced up outlook that we're looking forward to, is unprecedented government support, unprecedented outside of war times, right? Anil mentioned the latest package, but overall we've spent about $10 trillion in just fiscal and monetary support to put together. If you look at it in terms of percent of GDP, we've spent 26% of GDP in fiscal support and another 20% in monetaries for a total of 46%. So we've spent about half of GDP just over the last year in fiscal and monetary support. This is by far much bigger than anything than the rest of the world has done. If you look at UK, Eurozone, and Japan, they come to about 30% of GDP. So we managed to outspend Europe. If you look at more closely at the $6 trillion in fiscal support that all the packages together come up with, it seems like lavish amount of money was doled out to just about everyone. Businesses got $968 billion in support. If you think about stimulus checks, $856 billion. Unemployment benefits, $764. And here's the rest of the programs. $512 went to the states. $300 billion have gone to education. Of course, all of this was done by deficit financing, so it blew a hole in the budget deficit. And to paraphrase Bridgerton, the political class seems to have actually given up. I mean, no longer settling for a duke when they can have a prince. Gone are the days of sort of small packages and hand-wringing about everything and how to pay for them. The era of big government is unquestionably back. That's for sure. And, and some of it seems to be particularly overdone. For example, take the aid to state and local governments. CARES funding, which was passed last year, appropriated $150 billion for state and local governments. Well, two-thirds of that is still unspent, right? So if you look at some states actually have spent less than 50% of that money. If you look at Texas, Illinois, Virginia, they fall into that category. The vast majority of states have spent between 50 to 75% of that funding. California is one of them. California has spent about 68% of CARES Act. And again, this was last year's funding. And a few states have spent a bit more than 75%. Now, thanks to the latest act, as Anil mentioned, another $362 billion is coming their way. So we did a quick calculation of state budget shortfall. It's about $130 billion. This is from last April to June of 2021. So this is sort of a forecast for that. But if you actually look at the aid they're getting, it's $512 billion. So the state shortfall, the budget shortfall is much smaller than the aid they're getting. There hasn't been a better time to be a state. And in the words of Bridgerton, marrying above one station is an art form. Great for states. They were able to find a sugar daddy in their federal government to subsidize them. But this is yet another reason, a third reason why we think it's going to be a very juiced up recovery going forward, because state and local government has a lot of money in their coffers. Now, of course, if you look at consumers are also sitting on a pile of cash thanks largely to the many rounds of fiscal stimulus. If you look, for example, here we have real income excluding government transfers, which fell dramatically last April as millions of people lost their job. But if you kind of put in there the real income including government transfer, the difference between the two is $4 trillion, the highest it's ever been. In fact, if you can actually clearly see there the 3 rounds of fiscal stimulus, which sort of has spiked up the real income. If you look at net wealth, $130 trillion, we've never been this rich. If you look at excess savings, that's $2.3 trillion. We've never had this much money in our accounts. So consumers are in great shape. In fact, if you look at consumer balance sheets, they're very healthy, they're pristine. For example, the Census Bureau has started a new survey which asks people how did they spend, how did they use their stimulus money, and it's broken down by income. So household income. Now, some part of it went for spending, so some households did spend some of the money, especially those that make more than $100,000, spent about a third of it. Some of the money was saved, but a vast majority of the money was used to pay down debt, especially at the lower end of the income distribution. So there's no surprise that if you look at credit card debt, that has declined dramatically. Another good news is that delinquencies, if you look at overall delinquency rate for consumers, that has actually gone to cycle highs. Usually, historically, is about 4.5% to 5%. Right now, it's 3.5%. It's the lowest we have ever seen. So this is great news for consumer balance sheets. Same goes for business sector, right? If you look at business and banking sector, business delinquencies, which tend to rise up dramatically during recessions, they've actually kind of increased a little bit, but nowhere near what you see during a normal recession. If you look at the banking sector, banks are sitting on $2 trillion of core capital. They're very well capitalized. If you look at the Tier 1 capital as percent of risk-weighted assets, this is now at cycle highs. So banks are in solid shape as well. And of course, the fourth main reason for optimism, as Anil mentioned, are the vaccines. And this has gone much better than expected. In fact, if you sort of take a cross-country perspective, one of the countries that are doing very well is Britain. But UK is actually focusing, they're vaccinated with one shot, about 50% of their people, but they're focusing only on that first shot. They've only vaccinated about 13% when it comes to with 2 dosage. So only 30% are fully vaccinated. US has done very well with vaccinated nearly 40% of people, and about a quarter of the entire population are fully vaccinated. We're far ahead of Europe, which is kind of lagging behind, both in giving one shot, and only 6% of the population is fully vaccinated. So if things go as they plan, as things go apace, we do think that we're going to reach herd immunity roughly around early to mid-June. By then, probably about 40 million people would have had the disease. An additional 30 million would have gone unreported, and the rest would be vaccinated. So in the words of Dr. Zeus, who, by the way, himself have been a bit of a trouble lately, but now my troubles are going to have troubles with me, so our troubles have met their match in the vaccines, which is absolutely great news. And again, with a reopening economy, with the vaccines and unprecedented government support, we do think that even the fact that this recovery has been uneven and lopsided, as Anil mentioned, even that will mend. We will right the ship very soon. One thing that Anil mentioned is that the labor market has been slow to recover. Well, the good news is that the job openings are at the highest level they've ever been, 7.4 million job openings. We do think that the U.S. economy will add, on average, about 7 million jobs this year. So that's a very strong labor market. If you look, for example, at services, which are another sector that has been very deeply hurt during this recession, this is the Purchasing Manager Index for services, which gives you the expectation about how the service sector will unfold over the next year. It's now at cycle highs. It's the highest it's been since 2014. And 50 is the demarcation between expansion and recession. We're certainly way above that, so certainly firmly in the expansion territory. The leisure sector, which has lost the vast majority of jobs, right? Even jobs are coming back in leisure and hospitality as well. If you look at this graph here, historically, you would see that leisure and hospitality makes up about between 17 and 20% of new jobs added each year. In the last few months, they've made up 80% in February, 35% in March. So leisure and hospitality jobs are finally turning around. And if you want to look yet for better signs, you can look at airport traffic, which, yes, it's still about 40% below normal levels, but nonetheless, it's the highest we've seen since the pandemic began. If the same thing goes for seated diners, down about 20%, but the best we've seen since about a year when the pandemic began. So our baseline is for unprecedented growth fueled by vaccines, a reopening economy, unprecedented government support. But the next question is, what could go wrong, right? What are the risks? What is the thing that keeps us up at night? And there's a couple of these. So first, let's start with the downside risk. And of course, one of the issues with this is the virus new strains, right? And how successful the vaccines are against them. Now, the 3 vaccines that have been approved in the US, one of them is now on pause, but all 3 of them are very effective against the prevailing wild type of the virus. They're also quite successful and very effective against the UK strain. And this is important because UK strain is making up about 2/3 of the new cases over the last 4 weeks. However, they're much less effective against the South African as well as the Brazilian strain, which is certainly a cause for worry. The good news is that these last 2 strains, as of now, make up a very small percentage of new cases. This could change, and that's one thing to worry about. Another concern is, of course, vaccine hesitancy. But even here, the numbers are going up. Here we have a Gallup poll that shows the percent of people that are willing to take the vaccine. And they're showing that the latest number shows 74% of people are willing to take the vaccine. But we certainly can incentivize them. I mean, and some companies are doing that already. Krispy Kreme is offering 1 free donut per year. You've got a movie theater in Cleveland offering free popcorn. You got brewery in Wisconsin offering 10 cents beer, so these are all great. And my personal favorite, a joint for a jab. There's a marijuana dispensary in Michigan offering a free roll joint. I think this last one has true staying power and it's true game changer. So I'm very, very hopeful on this. Now, but certainly the risks are mostly tilted to the upside. So one of the things that worries us quite a bit is inflation, right? And if you look at money supply growth has been growing by about 25% year over year over the last 3 months. This is unprecedented. This is something we have never seen before. Inflation expectations are on the rise. Here we have 5-year break-even inflation rates. This is the market expectation about inflation. It's the highest since 2008. Now, some of this is cosmetic, right? The inflation over this year will be higher because of base comparison to last year when inflation was real low. So that's nothing to worry about. However, should these inflation expectations become entrenched, then we have a big, serious problem in our hands. And that's because, we've seen this movie before, right? We've seen the lavish government spending of the 60s lead to inflation of the 70s and even stagflation in the 70s, right? In the words of Bridgerton, the brighter a lady shines, the faster she may burn. We may shine so bright, the economy may get so overheated, it may force the Fed's hand to actually tighten sooner than it expects, which is certainly a risk. This will bring the party down. This will certainly end the recovery. And in fact, the bond market is already signaling this. If you look at the 10-year Treasury yield, they've been going up by 1 percentage point compared to last year. And of course, some of this is due to higher growth rate and some of it due to higher inflation. Now, the Fed itself has told us, they're going to be on hold forever. It's told us it's not even thinking about raising rates, right? They're going to raise rates by the end of 2023. We think the market doesn't seem to buy this. They think they're going to hike by the end of next year. We think it's going to be even sooner than that. It's probably going to be towards the 3rd quarter of next year. Certainly, we don't think inflation is a problem right now in this year because we have a lot of slack, especially in the labor market. But come next year, I think inflation will pick up meaningfully, and that will become a problem then. Now, another cause for worry is the stock market euphoria. A lot of the stimulus checks have ended up in Robinhood accounts, kind of goosing up the stock market. You remember the Reddit bros and GameStop. And actually, a bunch of money has ended up also in the dark corners of the universe, in things like CPACs and cryptocurrencies and stuff that is not even subject to laws of gravity, like non-fungible token, right? So this nonsense, this digital artwork here just went for $70 million the other day, and it's digital art. In fact, if you look at the stock valuation as percent of GDP, which is colloquially known as the Warren Buffett measure, that's actually quite high. It's the highest we've ever seen, right? So again, market overextension is a real concern going forward. And finally, and I know that it's become quite unfashionable lately to worry about the debt. But public debt is a concern, perhaps not now, but down the line. So if you look at public debt levels, they're at about 80% of GDP right before COVID started. And if things had progressed the way we had before without COVID, it would have gone to about 100% of GDP by 2030, by the end of the decade. However, with COVID stimulus help, that's actually meant it's going to go as high as 126% of GDP by the end of the decade. This matters a lot because interest payment on the debt will balloon. Just looking back over the last 10 years when interest rates were really low, collectively, we spent about $2.5 trillion on interest payment on the debt just the last decade, and this is far more than we ever spent on VA or education or transportation. And even if we, under a good scenario, if interest rates stay benign, stay low as they are now, we do think that an interest payment on the debt by 2025 will be about $870 billion. That will eat up 14% of the budget. So that's a lot more than, it will eat out a bigger share of the budget, so we'll have less to spend and invest on other things that we want to do. In the words of Bridgerton, those who marry in haste must repent at leisure. Might we repent later on the excesses of today? That remains to be seen, but it's certainly a concern. Finally, here's our forecast for GDP growth. Welcome to the new roaring, soaring 20s. Real GDP is going to reach pre-pandemic level this quarter, and we're forecasting a growth rate of 6.8% this year, 5.1% next year. Unemployment is also going to come down. Labor market is going to reach pre-pandemic levels by the middle of next year. Unemployment rate, we're forecasting 5.4% this year and 4.2% next year. So where does this leave us? Well, we are in the new roaring 20s with the fiscal policy of the 60s, with the inflation worries of the 70s, and a bad quarantine hairstyle of the 80s. So let me end on a wish, right? In the words of Bridgerton, if you desire the sun and the moon, all you have to do is go out and shoot at the sky. It is time for us to leave our pajamas behind, leave our couches behind, and go out there and shoot at the sky. And with that, I thank you, and I'll turn it over to Anil.
Thank you, Mira, for doing a brilliant job, as always. Now that you have seen what the national economy looks like, the question is, what does this mean for us here in Southern California in Orange County? What does it mean for you? Where are we headed? So let me talk about Southern California and Orange County. But before I do that, let me give you a reminder again. Please use your Q&A button to post your question that we'll answer after the panel discussion. Now, vaccinations have been wonderful, as we all know. But not only that, they have ramped up in Orange County as well as in Southern California. Over 30% of the people in Orange County have been vaccinated. In fact, Orange County reports that about 1.3 million people have gotten at least one dose, which is about 54% of its population. And about 34% have gotten both doses. People over 65, luckily, have gotten done much better. 65% of those people have gotten their 2 doses. The same is true for other counties in Southern California, though they're not doing quite as well as Orange County, of course. LA, Riverside, San Bernardino, they all are making progress and hopefully will continue to pick up this pace. Nationally, that is true as well, as we pointed out earlier. Other indicators of controlling the virus are positive as well. Hospital beds, for example, in January, we had 42% occupancy. Right now, it's 2%. ICU beds, we had 60% occupancy in January, now it's 4%. So things are looking pretty good. So we thought we'd take a look for a minute at all the lockdowns that we had in California and a lot of other states, how much of an impact that it may have had compared to the states where they didn't do that as well. So we looked at an index of government stringency that shows how much, to what extent state was locked down. For California, the index is 65, Oxford University numbers. And California's unemployment right now is about 9.2% below the pre-pandemic level. If you compare this to New York, which had a pretty tough time at the beginning because they got hit early, their employment down to 10.8% below the pre-pandemic. Their index is 71. But if you look at Texas and Florida, their index is much lower because they didn't shut down. And as a result, they didn't lose as many of their employees. Texas 4.5% below its pre-pandemic level, and Florida 5.2. But if you look at the deaths per person, New York has 263 deaths per 1,000 compared to Texas of 170 and 158 because New York got hurt worse. But California, its death rate is lower, 153 per 1,000. As you know, California locked down more severely than Texas or Florida. So there is sort of a trade-off. I'm sure it'll take more analysis than the simple calculation to show what the impact of lockdowns has been. But unemployment rates have dropped considerably. For Orange County, from 14.9% last May, unemployment rate has dropped to 6.54%. LA and Inland Empire also have much lower, but not quite as low as Orange County unemployment rates. So there has been improvement in the employment picture nationally as well as here in Southern California. But Orange County is still lagging behind. If you look at the employment picture in Orange County, where, as I said, we are still about 9.6% below our pre-pandemic level. And that is, compared to the US, is not that great. US is only 5.5% below its pre-pandemic level, almost twice as much better than Orange County. The state as a whole has done a little bit better. But if you compare Orange County to Riverside, Inland Empire, and Los Angeles, we have done better than Los Angeles, but not as well as Inland Empire, because Inland Empire did not suffer quite the same loss to begin with. And since they don't have a whole lot of leisure hospitality industry, Disneyland and others, their recovery has been much better. But labor market in Orange County has been devastated through this pandemic. We lost 278,000 jobs in 1 month alone in April. May situation was equally bad. Since then, we have been recovering jobs, and as of March, we are still about 137,000 jobs below the pre-pandemic level in February of 2020. So there's a long way to go for Orange County economy to recover. When you look at jobs gained, U.S. has gained 64% of its lost jobs, as has Inland Empire. California about 44%, but Orange County has regained only about 40% of its job losses. So Orange County has been slow, and we'll come back to the details of that in just a minute. LA is 33%. And the answer to that slow growth, slow recovery for Orange County lies in leisure and hospitality sector. Compared to the US, it is a much larger proportion of Orange County's employment, and the decline in Orange County's, both Orange County and US declined by 50% in their leisure and hospitality employment. But the recovery in Orange County has been a lot worse. We are still about 39% below the jobs. Disneyland is still closed, and other restaurants and hotels are not doing so well. The data from Google Mobility shows the same thing, people moving around. Orange County is starting to do better, but still well below United States. I wonder about that. I drive on the freeway, it's getting crazy again. So I guess this data is a little bit old. Things are picking up pretty rapidly. The sectors that have done much worse in terms of recovery are the following. Overall, Orange County is down only about 9.6%. Retail is down only about 5%, and clothing down only about 9.5% after having declined by 61.4% in terms of their jobs. Leisure and hospitality sector in general was down about 50%, is down only about 34%, still a long way to go. But if you look at the subsectors, arts and recreation, amusement and gambling, accommodations, and restaurants, those sectors have had much harder time getting their job back, at least so far through February of 21, March of 21, the data that we have today. Mickey is not happy. Disneyland has been closed for a whole year. And there have been a lot of job loss. Disneyland provides a name recognition to Orange County, but it also has a major economic impact. We did a study for Disneyland for 2018, and we showed that Southern California benefits to the extent of about 78,000 jobs from the operation of Disneyland and all the impact that it has on restaurants and hotels in the region. We estimate that currently there are only about 18,500 jobs because of Disneyland's closure. And therefore, we have lost about 60,000 jobs in Southern California because of closure of Disneyland. For Orange County, the impact is about 43,000 fewer jobs because Disneyland has not been operational for over 12 months. In terms of output, we estimate in 28, Disneyland's operation generated $8.5 billion for Southern California economy. And during this last year, we have lost about $6 billion of that output. So it's a pretty strong hit, of course, to Disneyland, Disney company, but also to Orange County. Now, this impact of the virus and the economic downturn has been felt unequally. It's worse for certain age groups, for certain education levels, and depending on the ethnicity you have. For people between ages of 20 and 34, for example, if you look at the proportion of population, which is in green, and the proportion of unemployment claim that is filed in yellow, you can see that much more claims were filed by people in that age group, which means that they suffered greater loss. Similarly, for ethnic groups, whites proportion to their population size filed fewer claims than Hispanics, Asians, and blacks, indicating again that much higher job loss in these ethnic categories. But the ending is in sight. Orange County cases and Southern California cases are both down to the lowest level we have seen from the very beginning of the pandemic. And also, if you look at the number of deaths, they have been declining as well. And so long as the vaccinations continue, and I hope, and I repeat that again, go get your vaccination if you haven't and sign up for that because that's a sure way to protect yourself and others. And that is a good story unfolding with this consequent positive economic impacts. So if you look ahead, Disneyland is opening, as you know, on April 30th. Buy your tickets if you can find them. The state as a whole, the governor announced, will open fully on June 15th. And by then we should have herd immunity, whatever way you want to define it. And if you look at spending, consumers can't wait. Orange County spending here shown here. We are already above the spending level before the pandemic. People are spending their money, they got stimulus checks, they've been saving, and they're ready to spend that. And that's very healthy for the economy. At the same time, unemployment claims are going down, which means more people are getting jobs and going back to work. Unemployment claims are down to about 12,000 per week compared to 90,000 soon after the pandemic hit. 12,000 still about 6 times the normal rate, but the trend is going in the right direction. Housing market has been phenomenal, a very unusual housing market in terms of prices, a median price of housing. Orange County housing prices started to go up in December 2019, very sharply, after kind of slow 2019. Until pandemic hit, they slowed down for a couple of months. But since August, housing prices have been rising by double digits. In the last 7 months, annualized rate is about 12.5%. Orange County median price is $910,000, believe it or not. The same story is true for other counties in the region. In LA, in Riverside, in San Bernardino, after a slow 2019, they all are having very sharp increases. Now, that increase is not sustainable, double digit. We expect these increases to come down to about 5 to 6% for the next year, this year and next, as mortgage rates continue to rise and people have other places they want to spend money on as they get out of their homes. Now, to supplement the government data, as we do our econometric analysis and forecasts of employment, we do our own survey. Wood Center does that every quarter, of business sentiments to see what businesses are thinking about the next year, next quarter, what they plan to do. And we create an index based on that called OCBX index. That index jumped from 71.6 to 95.3 for the last survey that we did at the end of March. A huge increase, and the index is at its highest level now. Employment, we expect, will continue to follow that index because index has been a good predictor of employment. We expect that to go up. We also asked some other questions of our respondent, and if you're not participating in the survey, I'd like you to. And since you signed up for this webinar, we'll send you an invitation if you want to fill that survey, very short survey. We asked them, when do you expect your businesses to go back to the pre-pandemic level? 37% of the businesses said we already are there or higher, at a higher level. Another 37% said that by the end of this year, they would have recovered all their lost sales and be back at that level. Only about 26% said that it'll be 2022 or later that their businesses will achieve the pre-pandemic level. When we asked them about the regional activity throughout their region, what they see happening in other businesses, 82% expect regional businesses to grow, their competitors and their fellow business people to do well as well. Only a small percentage expect the situation to stay unchanged or not increase at all. We asked two special questions as part of the survey. We asked them about their opinion of the American Rescue Act. What impact are you most concerned about because of this American Rescue Act? About a large percentage said that they are concerned, 47.4%, that it will raise the national debt. They're concerned about putting the burden on future generations. 27.6% said higher inflation may result from this. 16% said we're fine with it. There's nothing wrong with it. It's not too big. It's not too small. But another 8.6% were concerned that it will cause the Fed to tighten up sooner than expected. We also asked them the impact of the $15 minimum wage that was being discussed, whether it will increase, to what extent it will increase their labor costs. And 81.6%, almost 82% said that labor costs will go up by less than 5%. The rest of the people said somewhere between 5% and about 20%. The point is that most businesses in Orange County are already paying minimum wage or more. Orange County is a high-cost area. Secondly, California is going to go to $15 minimum wage on the 1st of January 2023. So I think businesses are already moving up. So this is not going to have much of impact here for us in Orange County. But we asked them other questions about their profitability, about sales, and about hiring. And in each case, compared to a year ago, second quarter of 22, it was a mirror image. For example, for profits, they expected profits would decline by 78% second quarter of last year in the middle of the pandemic. Now they expect 53% expect profits to go up. So a complete opposite story for profits, for sales, and hiring. Business people are very optimistic looking ahead to the future. Based on all the econometric analysis that we do, and based on the answers to our quarterly survey and other data that we have forecasts here for you of what we expect in the coming year or two. After having lost 148,000 jobs on an annualized basis, we believe that this year Orange County's economy will gain about 69,500 jobs. Now these are annualized numbers, average for the whole year. If you look at month-to-month comparison, for example, December 21 to December 20th, total employment may be over 100,000 jobs more than a year ago in December 20. Hospitality sector, for example, we expect it'll regain 24,000 jobs on an annualized basis. But its year-to-year comparison, December to December, may indicate that Orange County leisure and hospitality jobs are up by 80,000 jobs, and that's what we expect. Professional and business services, which is one of the largest sectors, if not the largest sector actually, for Orange County, will gain about half of their lost jobs on an annualized basis. Trade and transportation about the same, and then other sectors are also going to be improving their payrolls and getting back to normal. But it will be the third quarter, middle to third quarter, to the second half of 2022, that Orange County will have fully recovered its pre-pandemic job, will reach back to that level. So here are our annual forecasts for Orange County, where this year we project 4.6% growth, next year about 5.1%, and then it's dropped down to its normal range, which is just under 2%, 1.9%. Similarly for LA and Inland Empire. We have a report for you that we'll put it online, so you can look at all the data and analyze it. With that, we conclude our presentation of the economic forecast. A reminder again to post your questions on any part of this presentation so far. And we are going to bring in our real estate panel, but give us 30 seconds to get them all signed up and logged on, and we'll be right back. Thank you. Thank you for your patience. We are ready to now start with our real estate panel. And to begin that, let me introduce the moderator, Bob Osbrink. Bob Osbrink is the director of our Center for Real Estate, and he has his whole career he spent in commercial real estate. He worked as vice president at the Irvine Company and in senior positions at Wakefield and Cushman and Grubb and Ellis. Bob also serves on the Lusk Center at USC, the Real Estate Center, and many other boards. So without much ado, I'm going to turn it over to Bob for the panel discussion. Bob?
Thank you, Anil. Thanks very much. That's a very informative, as always, presentation you and Mira provide for us. Very happy to be a part of this. We've got a couple good friends of mine joining us to talk about real estate. My background primarily was in commercial real estate, and I find myself now as the director for the Center for Real Estate at Cal State Fullerton. And I'll just speak for a second about that. We're very proud of the progress we've made at the Center for Real Estate. We've grown the Real Estate Association from about 8 students up to over 60 with a goal of 100. And now we have an intern program where we're actually placing people into the commercial real estate and residential real estate fields, property management, all the different fields into our industry here in Orange County. So far, from pretty much a dead stop over the last 18 months, we've placed about 40 interns. So any of you out there who's interested in having a real estate intern or somebody helping you out, we got some great students coming through. We do a filtering of them, and the results have been terrific. So I just wanted to give a little plug for our center on that. Today, I've got Vince Ferragamo and Mark Bridge with me, and they're going to cover residential real estate as well as multifamily real estate and the trends we're seeing around Orange County, things that have been going on. Vince, we go back a long way, raising money for charities near and dear to us, and friendship. Quarterback at Nebraska, Cal, Nebraska most notably, All-American. His professional football career is outstanding. For those of you who can see in the background, Vince, who's the guy with the hair there?
That's an old picture, Bob. I'm afraid that's one of those cardboard cutouts that they did during the COVID crisis for last year. They did an All-American Day, so they just sent that to all the All-Americans in the past, and it was kind of fun. But it's I just thought I'd put it up there for the fun of it.
I'd love to borrow some of that hair, Vince. That's great. That'd be terrific. Vince is the owner of Touchdown Real Estate, residential, high luxury and residential. He's also has a winery, Ferragamo Winery. He's a family man through and through. He's done work with the many foundations. He's got the Vince Ferragamo Foundation. I've always appreciated the fact that besides being a quarterback in a Super Bowl, which many men would like to have in their resume, he's got a great family. He's done a lot of work philanthropically, and so we look forward to hearing your thoughts on where the residential markets are going. Mark Bridge I'm fortunate to have another friend here. Mark is a managing director at Cushman & Wakefield. He's been in the business commercial multifamily side for about 20 years now. And Mark and I work together at Marcus & Millichap. He's a great Angels fan. I'll put that in there. And we've enjoyed that together. Every year at M&M and every year at Cushman & Wakefield, he's a top performer. So he knows the markets extremely well, great relationships, as well as being an owner of apartment buildings, multifamily products. So he's got both sides of seeing the equation for those of you out there. If you have some questions, we can cover pretty much all of it. So with that, let me have Vince. Why don't you take a run through what you're seeing in the markets? This has been an amazing year to come out of, and so now we're going to look forward to seeing what the future holds. So take it away.
Thank you, Bob.
Yeah.
Thanks so much. I just was so interested in the outlook economic forecast that was presented earlier, and they did touch a little bit about the median price home in Orange County. And you know, being a broker for 30 years, I've seen the market change over the years, up and down, and we always have a cyclical market. But recently, I want to just touch a little bit about, you know, our biggest investment in our lifetime, which is our home. And being in the residential sector for 30 years, you know, I've noticed that, you know, the equity growth over the years has been tremendous, especially here in California and especially in Orange County. So I'd like to touch a little bit about what's going on in the marketplace in Orange County. Why do we see the prices rising the way we've seen them? We believe at this point for a long time that we think real estate has been one of the best investment vehicles that you could invest in, along with gold possibly. But over the long haul, it's been great investment. And we see, as was presented earlier, that the median price of a home in Orange County is over 900,000. It's more like 950,000. Looking back in January of 2009, the median price of a home in Orange County was 360,000. When I first got started in this business many years ago, it was way below that. But you can see over the years how we've progressively increased our net worth and wealth through real estate. And there's a lot of reasons for it. I mean, California is a big draw for many people, the climate, the weather. But as we see now, why are prices going up so fast? In the past year, we've seen an appreciation of 14% or more just in single family homes. And in Orange County, all homes, including condos, townhomes, and single family homes, the median price home is 800,000. So when people look at it across the country and say, wow, that's a lot of money. And yes, it is. But why are we seeing such an uptick in this marketplace? And so that's what I want to just briefly touch upon. And I think there's a few reasons for that. Number one, the new construction is below a level to bring the marketplace in balance. There's reasons for that. The cost of materials, especially lumber, is skyrocketed. It's very expensive. The acquisition of land in Orange County is tough. So we've seen new home construction is at a low. So there's less inventory on the marketplace. And in the resale market, inventory has decreased 30% in the past year. And that's remarkable. And the days on the market, which is another indicator, is the lowest it's ever been in the history of the real estate market. It's the average time to sell a home today in Orange County is 21 days. Wow. Which is the lowest. And it's pretty remarkable. Wow. Most homes are going over the asking price by 1.5% to 2%. So people look at it and try to understand the marketplace. The median price per square foot for a home in Orange County is $450 a square foot. So it's pricey. We've seen this increases over the past few years. And, you know, that's when, and you would think with unemployment down, or with unemployment the way it is today, that the marketplace would be a little different. But again, the reasons that we see this is that this is a cherished investment opportunity for most people. Interest rates are at an all-time low. There's a lot of cash buyers that are buying properties. maybe a lot of foreign investment coming into California. So, we do see that the market is a real bullish market today, especially in the residential sector.
Well, that's exciting for people to hear, and it is interesting to watch what's going on, and trying to find out the reasons why. We clearly know this is a great place to live. I mean, it's with the weather and all the activities and everything here in Orange County. Yeah, clearly that's always been a trademark. I've been here since 73 or 4, so it's been a great place. Mark, go ahead and give us some overviews on the multifamily and what you're seeing as not only a broker but as an owner, and with the tenants. What's going on these days in the multifamily arena?
Thanks, Bob. I was hoping to touch on the market outlook, urban versus suburban, and the shift and vacancies and rent collections in Orange County. But at a macro level, multifamily has done very well, especially suburban multifamily. Demand for rentals have been strong. Loan performance has been strong. During the financial crisis of 2009, 16% of loans were in default. So far during COVID, only 2%. So the overall product type has done very, very well compared to the rest. Now, industrial's also done well too, though. I think that's the only one that's done a little bit better for various reasons. But, at the beginning of this, 22 million jobs were lost in 2 months, and it had taken 10 years to create those jobs. So it's not a shock that we needed some stimulus to get us back on track. And for reference, the global financial crisis stimulus in 2009 was 6.5% of GDP, and it was dispersed over 13 months. The COVID-19 first stimulus was 25% of GDP and dispersed over 7 weeks. So not every downturn is the same. Not every recovery is the same, but multifamily has shown it can be resilient compared to other commercial asset types. And this has been true through the downturns that I've been a part of so far. And I see multifamily investment as having a bright future in Orange County moving forward this year and into the future. But every asset class in commercial real estate was impacted last year, one way or the other. Historically, multifamily has been more resilient compared to some of the others and recovered faster than they have. After the global financial crisis, it regained pre-recession peaks in price faster than the other asset types. And this time, although the multifamily sector has not been propped up by the pandemic, it had a strong performance throughout this economic time of uncertainty. So investment activity paused in the second quarter of last year, but it's rebounded and been very active in the private client realm, where most of my business is done. Multifamily values are at, close to, or even above pre-pandemic levels in different parts of Orange County. I think everyone has seen an article on the flight from urban to suburban markets, and there are some different opinions on how long it could last, but I think we all agree that suburban multifamily has benefited from the shift. Orange County and Inland Empire, as Anil had mentioned, Inland Empire has done very well. Orange County and Inland Empire multifamily have done very well this year. There are some Class A properties that have been negatively impacted by young professionals moving home and a steady supply of new development. The Class C and B multifamily has done better. I'm a big fan of owning Class C, what we call bread and butter units in Orange County, which is also where more of the private client investors are looking to invest as well. Vacancy rates in Orange County, buildings that I sell are around 3 to 4% on average. That has been the case for a long time. I see that continuing into the future, partly because home ownership is out of the reach for many residents, and partly because there's a strong renter pool in Orange County. I also just saw a report that said less than 1/4 of Orange County residents earn enough to afford the median priced home right now. And the average tenant pays about 44% of their income towards housing costs. So I see vacancies staying very low at 3 to 4% throughout the year and into the future. Rent collections are another story. Vacancies in B and C assets stayed very low through the pandemic, but collections saw a decrease in all classes. The pandemic, coupled with statewide eviction moratorium and the COVID-19 Tenant Relief Act, has allowed tenants to stay in their units without having to pay rent and has caused a decrease in some rent collections. I've seen the biggest increase in aged receivables in Class C apartments, but that still hasn't been as much as a lot of people thought it could have been early on. So most people are paying full rent, or at least what they can afford to pay, and are working with their landlords on plans to pay back what they owe moving forward. And remember, the rent is not forgiven and they will still owe all the rent. But until July 1st, there are no eviction proceedings for non-payment of rent. Lenders have been the most skeptical of rent collections and have required a lot of the borrowers to have reserve accounts in order to make sure that they can pay their mortgages, which I think contributes to the 2% that we've seen so far compared to 16% again before. But even so, investors still have a big appetite for deals. And I think everyone sees July 1st around the corner and collections continuing to get better throughout the year. So back to you, Bob.
Thanks, Mark. That's a good update. It's interesting to hear the two convergences here is where there's a lot of demand for B and C class apartments, and yet the median house price, Vince, is like way up over here. So having been in this business for most of my life, I mean, it's pretty amazing to try and understand how the tug and pull is going to play out. What are some of your guys' thoughts on where you think it's going to roll here?
Well, I have to agree with the economic forecast. I don't really see these double-digit appreciation numbers continuing at this pace, because we're just going to run out of room. We're going to run through the end zone here in a minute. But, so I think that things will come back to a normalcy. I think a 5% appreciation is pretty accurate, and if that happens, then I think everything will return to normal.
Yeah, Mark, do you see the multifamily flattening out at all? Because it's been quite a ride here for a couple of years.
Yeah, we're seeing more transactions coming back, and there's the demand has always been besides the second, third quarter of last year has been increasing, and we continue to see that happening. Deals are not quite selling as fast as the single family housing market on average, but anything priced properly is selling very fast. So I don't see it slowing down anytime soon.
Okay, and again, as you said, it's mostly private capital coming in, because we're hearing about a lot of people leaving California, a lot of people moving out to other states all over the Western U.S. Tax reasons, a lot of reasons. Are you, either one of you, seeing or sensing that in the clients you're talking to?
I think I have too, Bob, and I don't know about Mark, but in the residential sector, a lot of people are looking forward to maybe things are not quite as expensive. Maybe they'll go east, they'll go to the south. The taxation, less taxes to pay, especially in retirement. They may be thinking of moving out of state, and those retirees who are on a fixed income may find it hard to stay in California. But for everyone that's exiting, there's 2 or 3 that want to come in. So I think that that will balance out in some fashion.
I'm seeing a lot of articles on investment going to the Sunbelt states and the mountain western mountain states, in particular, those two. And the Sunbelt is just kind of like the bottom half of the U.S. there, kind of goes all the way across. Yeah,
you got Arizona, Nevada, and then the mountain states with Utah, and a little bit even in Wyoming and Idaho. So a lot of movement in that part. But as Vince just said, having been here a long time, for every time somebody moves out or a company moves out, it seems like there's a couple right behind it that wants to be here. So that's been one of the steady bases through all the crisis I've seen in real estate out here in the last 40 years or so, is that there's still a lot of people that want to be here. And so that usually stabilizes things. And we're not dependent on just one industry. In the commercial side of things, and I want to let everybody know, we're going to have our annual real estate forum, which we skipped in the spring, which is when we usually have it. We're going to have the Center for Real Estate Forum, be the 11th forum, and we're going to have that in the fall. So keep your eyes open, everyone on the call, for when we announce that. When we have that announcement, it will be in the fall. It'll be this type of format. It appears. We were hoping that by the fall we'd be back in a room together having a nice lunch, but we'll see how it continues to roll out. Maybe we will. Fall forum that will come up on the agenda. For those of you out there that are interested in the Center for Real Estate, it's business.fullerton.edu/CRE. That's business.fullerton.edu//CRE to get in and see what we're doing. We've got a newsletter that continues to update things. We're growing the campus, as Morteza said earlier. We're growing the Center for Real Estate. We're growing the business school. And it's an exciting time to be involved with Cal State Fullerton. So guys, I thank you so much for joining us. Once again, put your questions into the system here so Anil can coordinate them for them, and we'll be happy to stay around and answer anything we can. With that, I'll turn it back over to Anil.
Thank you, Bob, and Mark and Vince, for a very insightful conversation. We already got some questions, some of these on real estate, and we want to begin the Q&A session now. And as we do that, I want to bring in another gentleman. We thought we'll bring somebody from industry to provide an insight, and from Commercial Bank of California, Neil Pinge is joining us in the Q&A. Now, let me start with the first question, which is sort of to all the panelists, but since Neil just joined, I'll let him start first. What are the long-term effects of COVID and this recession that you see on your industry or area that you specialize in? Neil, how has the bank adjusted its operations because of the COVID?
Talk a little bit about myself. My name is Neil Pinge. I serve as the Chief Risk Officer of Commercial Bank of California. And as we have seen under the leadership of Ash Patel, our CEO that the panelists saw earlier, is we've seen an exponential growth in our banking empire. We went from $1 billion in 2019 roughly to about $1.6 billion where we sit currently. And that is primarily because of certain aspects of our very own business, whereby most banks are doing core banking, which is really taking deposits and giving loans for commercial real estates, multifamily homes, and so forth. But what we have done a little differently, and then Ash being the visionary, we invested a lot in our ACH business and our card business. And that is the business that has seen a significant impact or growth in COVID times. Last year, based on the Nielsen report that's out there, it's public information, we saw a growth of 41.6% in our business. That's very significant growth in the ACH and the banking space and the card space. So basically what we are seeing is a migration from our core banking, which is your cash and check-based business lending platforms, towards actually migrating to ACH and credit card based business. So, and much of it is around some of the verticals that I've seen that you heard earlier on the presentation. Hotel, leisure, travel, and tourism have been impacted drastically. But we've seen a significant shift of the business, or that cash flow, to pharmaceutical, healthcare, insurance, groceries, and banks that have made a significant value chain in that business. And certainly that also tells us of our way of being hiring some of the top candidates, as well as looking for good candidates to hire in our banking system. So quite a change, quite a dynamic place to be in the banking industry, and a migration to fintech is something that's been looked at a very high level.
You want to add something to that?
Sure. In terms of the specific long-term impacts of COVID. We're not big believers that this is going to completely change the world once and for all, and we're never going to get back to normal. So most of the things are going to get back to normal. We are going to go back to ball games. We are going to go back to concerts. So we're not a big believer on those. There's a couple of areas, though, that we do see some kind of a long-term impact of that has some kind of mainstay when it comes to the pandemic. First of all is, for example, office work. We do expect some of the firms to bring most of their employees back, but we do see a bit of a staggering, perhaps 18 to 20% of the workforce being remote 1 to 2 days a week. So that's already a change. Pre-pandemic, it was about 4% of workforce that was mostly remote. So that's one change. The other change that we're kind of see that has some sort of a staying power is business travel may see some kind of sea changes that have some room to kind of stay around for a bit longer. Our calculation, very hard to say right now, but our calculation does show that probably around 20% of business travel will not come back right away and may not even come back ever. So 80% back, but perhaps not 20%. So these are the two sort of the main. Of course, educational environment will see specific changes that have some staying power. We'll see more virtual classes and so on. But these are kind of the main few areas that we do think is going to see a staying change, something that the pandemic brought on that will continue in the future. The rest, we're pretty much, if we look back 5 years from now, looking here, we're going to be back to our normal lives, hopefully. Yeah.
I agree with Mira. But I think what you mentioned about people working from home and its impact on office market, I think that may be a longer term event. And I want the people in the real estate panel to offer their views on how do you see office building, commercial being affected by this change?
It's going to be dramatically affected. And it is right now because most companies are still now trying to figure out with the housing, working from home, and versus returning back to the normal environment. I've heard everywhere from 20 to 30% will not return to the offices, and when they do return, the configurations are going to be different. So you've got some people in smaller firms that they're nimble enough to be able to make those decisions and decide what lease to sign and what properties to look at. When you get into the larger operations, full floor and so forth, there's so many of these things that are still unanswered. It's slowing decision making down. So leases are being signed, but at a much slower rate than before. I think Orange County, we're running about close to 15% vacancy right now or higher, and that's pretty high in the office market, particularly Class A. Some of the secondary office buildings. Second tier, smaller buildings. Once again, when the small businesses can get back on their feet, they'll start doing okay, but we'll see a dramatic drop, I think, for a while before we can get the rates back up where they were.
There are several questions that you all submitted. Thank you very much. I'm going to combine a couple of these questions. There were several questions on interest rates and inflation, and they want to know, Mira, what is the downside risk to the forecast, baseline forecast that we presented, and in particular, what do we expect for interest rates and inflation?
Right. So I kind of mentioned this a little briefly during the presentation, but certainly inflation risk is on the upside, meaning, if we overheat, the economy will do so well that, we will end up having the Fed tighten sooner than expected. We do expect the Fed to tighten sooner than what they're telling us they will. The market is also kind of in the same page with us in that direction. Other downside in terms of, so this is one type of upside risk, I would call it, which eventually may actually lead us to a recession. In terms of the other downside risks, which are kind of important, Anil, I discussed this a little bit. Of course, again, the economy is still very closely linked to the projection, to the trajectory of the virus. So, of course, we are concerned about the virus, the new strains, the new variants. I discussed that already. Another concern is that, while the U.S. is doing so well, the rest of the world is not doing. It's really behind in terms of vaccination. In fact, just today, we are at the second biggest wave when it comes to COVID cases throughout the world. This is not the case. We don't feel it in the U.S. because cases are much lower than what we saw back in January and in December. But this is certainly a concern. And of course, India and Brazil are in the top of this. Eurozone is in the throes of a third wave. They're clocking in about 170,000 cases per day. Part of this has to do with the fact that these countries are still behind with vaccination. So these are certainly downside risks. And then the efficacy of these of the vaccines against the new variants is, of course, always a concern. We know that they're pretty effective against the wild type virus. We know that they're very effective, fairly effective against the UK. Not clear what the case is against the South Africa and the Brazil variant. But more importantly, we don't even know what other new types of variants may be out there, right? So if we're going to be wrong, or if we're going to, it's going to be because the virus is going to trick us. And we're very good at doing economic forecasts, but I never in my wildest dream did I think we'd have to deal with understanding viruses and the way they spread.
Sure. And Mira, we'll get another chance in October to take a look at it. Because we invite all of you to join us in October for our fall forecast, the last week of October, and we'll send you the invitation for that. Another question that people have asked is this a good time to buy property? This is a question that comes up every time. And what are the best areas for multifamily property in California or outside? So I guess we'll toss it out to the real estate people. Is it a good time to buy?
Right. Yeah. Interest rates are definitely helping people buying right now, historically low. I will tell you that, Orange County compared to LA and San Diego and Inland Empire and other areas in California did very well in the Great Recession, better than anywhere around. And then out of state, got hammered pretty hard. Arizona back then got hammered and Nevada got hammered. So I'm a big fan of Orange County multifamily always. I think it is tried and true. And then other areas in California are pretty safe compared to outside. But then you've got areas like Phoenix that have just been blowing up, and Phoenix is doing very well. Scottsdale and the other areas, Las Vegas is doing okay, compared to where it was, and I think that's probably a little bit more risky, but multifamily in Orange County is probably the safest bet that I can think of.
There's always been a saying, in the real estate market that you always buy low and sell high, but we feel that there's, in the real estate sector, especially the residential side, that it's always a good time to buy. So we believe in holding property for a long time, and over the lifetime of a property, the equity is going to be great, and the appreciation is you're going to see it every year. So we don't really see it going down, although there are little dips and cycles in the economy that affect the real estate market. But we believe over the long term is the best investment. So interest rates are real low right now. It's a great time to buy if you can find the right property, but there's not a lot of inventory, so you have to really look hard for it.
On the commercial side, there's an awful lot of people investigating what the next cycle of retail is. Retail obviously took a pretty serious hit with both E-Trade as well as the pandemic. Having said that, though, there's an awful lot of well-located properties, shopping centers, strip centers, that are still dependent on location, and they're in the middle of housing booms. And some of those will be an opportunity with creative investors. So I see that down the road becoming the infill part of Orange County, which has been stagnated a little bit. It could start coming back.
Mira, one of the questions they've asked us is on the value of the US dollar. Okay. And the question is, given all the deficit spending that is happening and is going to happen, and the impact on the interest rates that it's going to have, what are the prospects in the next year or two for the dollar's exchange value?
So great question, actually. It's not one of the easiest to answer because dollar is harder to unpack. First of all, I'm very glad somebody's worried about the debt. I thought I'd be the only person because, it's become, as I mentioned, it's been very unfashionable to worry about the debt lately. It seems we're blowing through these huge budget holes and budget deficits. So it's interesting. The dynamic about the dollar is actually quite interesting. Short term, we do think that's going to have a negative impact, obviously, because the more money you print, and of course we have very easy, very lax monetary policy. And as you've seen, the dollar has devalued quite a bit over the past, especially since the start of the year. And of course, with the infrastructure 1.0 bill and perhaps a potential 2.0 bill in the works as well, the actual infrastructure and the social infrastructure, that would actually have longer term impact. On the other side, though, which makes it a little harder to actually come up with an overall sort of assessment, that's why we don't have the dollar depreciation as much as you'd think, given this huge budget deficit, is because we do think the U.S. is going to outperform the rest of the world for the foreseeable future. Certainly, it'll do better than Eurozone. Certainly better than Japan. And if you think about Euro and the yen being the alternative currencies, that certainly speaks strongly about the dollar. So you have these two countervailing forces. The overall trend will still be a dollar depreciation, but especially in the longer term, but not so much in the short term, given the relative strength of the U.S. economy and what we're projecting for the U.S. economy.
Another question that was repeated, actually, that when PPP dollars and the stimulus checks stop, how will that affect the economy? Now, they provide the short-term stimulus. People are out. They have savings have gone up by trillions of dollars. And as soon as they feel like going out, spending is going to pick up very quickly. Yeah. But it may be exhausted over the next few months or a year. And what are the longer term prospects?
Well, I think this is a great question also for Neil, perhaps, if you want, and then I'll answer what our forecast would be. But you guys, I know you guys have done a lot of PPP loans, so it's a perfect question for you.
We have done a lot of PPP loans. We continue to watch the markets very closely, by the way. So a little segue before. We continue to watch the inflation markets. Inflation is at 2.5. LIBOR is at a suppressed 0.29% over 1 year. But what we are seeing is we need to evaluate the market in context of how the economy would move vis-a-vis the rest of the world. So with reference to how we are positioned with the PPP markets, much depends on when the pandemic is removed. Currently, we can't foreclose on homes. We cannot evict on homes. So you're seeing a tainted picture in the marketplace. There is adequate cash available that is really pushing those markets a little higher. Cash is king, as they say in the past, but lately cash is the source of it going into the markets. A little bit segue is when the PPP loans were first structured and there were 6 stimulus packages running for SBA loan pools, much of that money has gone towards payment of the paychecks. And those paychecks is in turn that money has gone into the stock market through 401ks or through some other means. Also with the lower interest rate, that money is finding its way back into the real estate market. But once the pandemic is lifted and you find a little correction that might come or a pullback in the marketplace, I would expect the markets to really pull back as well as the economy to slow down a little bit than we were. Some of them, I've heard a third of the pullback. Some of them are saying about 15 to 20% pullback. That's all up to speculation. But with reference to the PPP loan market, we continue to evaluate it, but I would be a little more bearish than bullish at this time if you are an investor or a strong investor in the marketplace. Thank you.
Thank you. I'm going to combine the next two questions, one of which is, when the foreclosures and evictions bans end, what impact do you think that will have on the so-called on the Southern California residential real estate? And the second question is, what is the percentage of OC homes in forbearance, and will they move to foreclosure, or if they will, when will they move to foreclosure?
Maybe the real estate panel.
Yeah, the real estate panel should be.
Oh yeah.
So I can just I know that some people requested forbearance that might not have needed it, and I don't think those will end up going to foreclosure. I think they were just maybe trying to take advantage of a program. It's something that you need to report on future loan applications, so it's not something that I would recommend if you don't need it. I will say that on the eviction part, there is going to be an uptick if it expires July 1st. It's still a matter of manpower, though. If you have to get through the courts and sheriff's department and all the necessary processes, it's not going to be a lot. There's going to be a backlog and an uptick because there's more people that haven't been paying than before, but I don't think it's going to be an onslaught. So.
The only thing I can add to that, Mark, would be that, forbearance, yeah, that actually was during the pandemic, and there was, some people took advantage of that. But from the standpoint of eviction and people not paying rent, the residential sector has been pretty lenient with that through the pandemic. I know personally, I've had properties that I've given the benefit of the doubt to our tenants, and being that they're out of work, that they have no way of paying the rent. So, the landlords have really taken a hit over the past. I for one have done that. So, but as far as foreclosure and those kind of things, I don't really see that coming into being a big effect on our industry, because of the fact that our loan base is so strong as far as equity based. And years ago when we had the recession, there was very little minimal equity involved in most of those properties. That's why they lost them to the banks. I don't really see that happening. And I think once we get back on our feet again, I'm more of an optimist. And I think that the economy will start rolling around and things will get better and people will be back to work.
If I may just
Yeah, sure.
very
Yeah.
quickly, I completely agree. You hear this absolutely apocalyptic sort of prediction. I think there was a headline just a couple of months ago, 40 million people are going to get evicted. And I'm thinking, I don't know where the media is getting this news. I don't know what numbers they're looking for. I mean, yes, there has been some people who have requested forbearance. Some people have not paid fully their rents. But if you look at the actual numbers, I mean, comparing month to month, right now, for example, only the number of people who are a bit behind on their rent is like 3% lower. I'm talking about here on an aggregate level than what you see, for example, compared to 2019 around this time. So the apocalyptic predictions are a bit much to bear at this point. I think the media, it helps them to get, I guess, clicks and to get attention and eyeballs. But I want everybody out there to be assured and to agree with our great panel here that things are not as dire as you may read out there and you may see out there.
Yeah, I agree. I have talked to several people in real estate industry. Many of them are apartment owners. And they, surprisingly enough, they are getting most of their rents. Yeah, and there is not as severe a problem. Now, two more questions before we conclude. The one question is, what is the effect of delayed recovery in Europe? Because Europe is suffering COVID, a very high rate of epidemic, and their vaccinations are not going that well.
Yeah.
And
trust Europe to mess it up. So, yeah, I know. They're going to bring us down. No, I do think even for Europe, I'm a bit more optimistic than I was if you asked me this question a month ago, Anil. They did ramp up a little bit of vaccine. They're now at about 20% of their population is vaccinated with one dosage. They're still about 6% with two dosages, as I mentioned, so pretty behind. But certainly this is one of the main risks to the global recovery. Mostly the concerns are how would that basically influence supply chains. These are mostly a question for China and Asia, but certainly some of them do come from Europe. And the worries that a lot of them may filter through inflation, sort of an inflation pickup, but from the supply side. I mean, we've heard a lot about semiconductor shortages. The car production is now behind. Again, a lot of that has to do with Asia, but some of these supplies do come from Europe as well. So some of these, so my concern about Europe not doing well or the rest of the world not doing well is filters in mostly not so much from the growth side, but mostly from an inflation perspective, from the supply side on the side of the inflation, which we didn't have much time to go into detail in the presentation, but I'm glad that the question was asked.
Yeah. And global slowdown or lack of rather vaccinations is an important issue because virus knows no borders. And as the world opened up and half the world is not vaccinated, we are not safe. So after we are taking care of our own people, I think it's very important, urgently needed, to find a way to get most of the people in the world vaccinated because disease does not have geographical borders.
Yeah.
And the last question is sort of interesting one for all of us to talk about is that, as we mentioned in our report, that President Biden's plan of raising corporate taxes is not going to be enough to fill the gap in the $2.25 trillion infrastructure bill, or the second one that he's going to be proposing. We don't know what the price tag on that would be. So where is the revenue going to come from other than the corporate tax to pay for the infrastructure and stimulus package? What are your views, panelists?
Yeah, we kind of mentioned this already. We do think that there is a shortfall about, I mean, you can give and take, but $850 billion, this is over the next 10 years. It's not going to be filled. That's the worry, right? The concern is that this will blow up the debt even further. And we're not even getting to the social infrastructure bill, which is in the rumors. It's about another $1 trillion to $2 trillion perhaps there. That one is supposed to be paid from the other side of the ledger, which is the individual income taxes. Again, we don't have details, so it's hard to speculate. My guess is the $850 billion, which we're roughly are sort of estimating this is going to cost, it will not be filled. It'll be deficit finance, as we've done for the rest of the $6 trillion that we've pumped into the economy so far. And I'd like to hear what the panel would have to say about this as well, in terms of debts and deficit and how that would impact their banking as well as the real estate market.
I can just quickly chime in. And what I would say is that I heard that the government prints a lot of the money as well. So the devaluation of the dollar, if they're going to print, $2, $3, $4 trillion, some of that money is not going to be necessarily corporate tax. It's just going to be printed. And so I encourage people, if they can, to acquire real estate as a hedge against that inflation. Real estate's always been very good purpose for that, and that's what I've tried to do myself.
I was just going to add that taxes, not only just on the corporations, but on households, especially high-income earners, are on the table. President Biden has talked about this several times, and you should expect that to fill most of that gap, other than what's filled by deficit spending.
And there's been advantageous things regarding real estate trades and real estate acquisitions and write-offs that I suspect those are going to be, they've been scrutinized for a long time, and they'll probably be much more focused in the next couple of years on that as we see those numbers rise. So that could be a state by state situation.
Right. Any other concluding comments, panelists?
I have a little different view from that. I think, with I agree with the numbers. 850 billion was the number, I think, or 900 billion, they say, with reference to the deficit. Much of these taxes are going to be segmented. So, for instance, hotel, leisure, travel would see a loss of tax income, but then pharmaceuticals, healthcare, and groceries would see a little higher tax income. So I wouldn't be surprised to see additional levies being put on those segments or those sectors of the business. Also, with reference to property taxes, I recognize that there could be an increase in property taxes, at least from my vantage point, on some of the consumer properties, so as to recoup some of the property tax recoveries from the commercial side of the business. Regardless, I would say U.S. is better positioned from the rest of the countries to absorb the shock made from the Eurozone or from other countries. And much of the presentation done earlier, we just printed $10 trillion, half of the US GDP over the last 1 year or so, which is bigger than some of the GDPs of 3 or 4 nations combined. So that should tell a story. It's better to be in the US and investing and continuing to grow, although we continue to look at the rest of the world with a different lens. Thank you.
The only thing I would want to offer is I believe that we have to be very careful when it comes to taxation. We've gone through this pandemic. Times have been tough for many people. And I think to put the burden on having to pay more, and I think it should come out of the wealth and what we start to earn. And once we start earning more, I think then taxation would become more prevalent. But I think at this point, property tax, those kind of things, it's already expensive enough for home ownership. And I think we start adding more taxes to that budget, it's going to make it very difficult on Americans to continue to thrive and to flourish. So at this point, I would have to say, have to be very careful if they choose to go that direction. And I would like to offer all of our viewers at home a chance to have a free app on their phone. If you're interested in the real estate sector, especially residential, log on to your search engine and pull up Ferragamo Real Estate. It's a free app. And if you need any information on homes or what's sold in your neighborhood or what's on the market, what's for rent, what's for sale, it'll be available to you on that app. So take a look at it. And I think you'll enjoy it.
I already got it.
Ferragamo
Thank you,
Real
Vince.
Estate.
And
All right.
thank you all the panelists, and thank you participants. I hope you enjoyed it as much as we did, this particular forecast, and hopefully it'll be beneficial to you as you make your personal and business financial decisions. And we look forward to seeing you again in fall, last week of October, and we'll send you the invitation for that. With that, we conclude this conference. Thank you very much.
Good luck, everyone.